Okay, for time's sakes, I'm going to get us all started. So thanks everybody for joining us today. This is the first webinar of the job search series here in 2026. We're really happy to bring this webinar series to you. It's a collaboration between TCAN and the ONTPD, really as a way to help people learn about the job search series and kind of figure out what you're going to do to look for different jobs and all of those things involved. Today, we are excited to get jumped off with intro to the job search and including a little bit of info about specifically helping your CV and figuring out what to do with that cover letter. My name is Nicole Locke. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and I'm the current education chair for TCAN. If you don't know what TCAN is the Trainees in Early Career Neonatology group. Please check us out for more information on being both a trainee and early career. I'm happy today to welcome our two speakers. We have both Jennifer Burnstead and Beverly Robin here today. Dr. Burnstead is a current neonatal perinatal medicine fellowship program director at the University of Virginia. She's an associate professor of pediatrics at UVA Health Children's and a co-director for their neuro-NICU program. She has a passion for mentoring and works in her lab evaluating mechanisms involved in neonatal brain injury. She completed her medical school training at Drexel University in Philadelphia, went to UVA for her pediatric residency, and completed her fellowship at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Robin is a current neonatal perinatal medicine fellowship program director at Rush University in Chicago. She's an associate professor of pediatrics at Rush University Children's Hospital. Her research interests include graduate medical education and the use of simulation in health professions education and training. She completed her medical school training at the Medical College of Wisconsin, pediatric residency at Johns Hopkins, and her fellowship at the University of Chicago Medical Center. I'm really excited to be jumping off the job search series here to them. Take it away. Thank you so much.
Well,
Thank-
go ahead.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, so we're really happy to be talking to you about the job search overview. We'll start off with a couple of quick slides just for some housekeeping things. Jen, if you could advance.
Yeah. So we're really excited to talk to you all today, like we said. So just a couple of reminders and housekeeping items. Today's session is recorded and sent out to those who registered, and Nicole can give you some more information on that if you need help with that. There will be a QR code at the end of the talk to go to a survey to give us an evaluation. And then Zoom links for the upcoming sessions will be sent out the week of the session. So there's many sessions in this series, and this is just the overview. So our agenda today, we're going to start by reviewing a recently published paper on some job search statistics for neonatal fellows in the academic years of 2022 and 23. Then we're going to talk about sort of the importance of self-reflection on deciding your priorities when you begin the job search. Followed by reviewing an overview of the timeline for your job search. And then we're going to finish out by talking about how to create a strong CV and cover letter and some nuts and bolts of the interview process and follow-up.
Okay, so we're going to start off with the paper, and it's interesting because it is recently published, but the data is not that new. So it's from 2023 academic year, and the group did a survey between February and March of 23 of TCAN members. So they used a listserv. The response rate was 131 out of 252, which is 52%, which for surveys is pretty decent. And what was really good is that they had regions represented from all areas of the country. 89% of people who were surveyed participated in the job search. 68% were going into academics and 23% were going into private practice. And of those people who weren't going into the job search, some were in military, some were going to do some hybrid type of jobs, some were undecided, and then unfortunately some were not entering practice for a variety of different reasons. So when we look at the job applications, you can see that the vast majority of people, 40%, submitted 1 to 3 applications, and then following that, around 29% submitted 4 to 6. Now you can see that 19% of people submitted 10 applications, which seems a little excessive. However, if you're looking for a job in a very specific area, that might be the case. Or if you're pretty open, that might be the case of sending, lots of emails and lots of applications. But in general, people will do, around 3 to 6. So for interview types, and this, obviously prior to COVID, this would have been different. The majority of interviews were on site. So 48% of job interviews were on site. 75% were virtual, and a large, excuse me, 16% have 75% were virtual, and then 16% were all virtual. Now, I struggle a little bit with this because when you think back to interviewing for fellowship, it's really hard to get a sense of the culture of a place and to get a sense of the people. So I think at least having a portion of on-site interviews is really important. If you're able to do that, definitely do that. And then when we look at job offers, the time from the job offer until decision is quite variable, and that depends on a number of factors. So you can see most people, it took them 1 to 2 weeks to respond. And then some people, it took more than 4 weeks. And we'll talk more about this because it's really going to depend on how many offers you get. Did you get an offer? Are you waiting for a different offer? And sort of variety of details on what you're considering. But obviously, you don't want to wait too long, and we'll talk more about that. So as you get started, it's really, really important to find your focus. You really have to think about your goals and your priorities and think of them from a personal standpoint and a professional standpoint. And think about what you want to be doing in 5 years or 6 years or 10 years. But you also have to go into this realizing that this doesn't have to be a job for life. So I'm not saying take a job that isn't a good job, but you are not necessarily looking for that job that's going to be your job for life. And it turns out to be your job for life. Fantastic. So let's dive in a little bit more into the personal and professional. So reflect on what's important to you. And I think this is really, really key of really reflecting. So when you think about personal factors, you're going to think about things like family, location, familiarity, cost of living, and even proximity to an airport. And we'll break these down a little bit more. Separately, but obviously intertwined and just as important, are to think about your professional priorities. So research, acuity, the unit size, what size unit do you want to practice? What kind of practice size do you want? What's the compensation? Who are the colleagues you're going to work with? What opportunities are there for growth? Are there leadership opportunities? Are there mentorship opportunities and mentoring opportunities? And what kind of work environment do you want to function in? So let's break down these a little bit into 2 separate categories, and let's talk more about personal. So you want to think about family, work-life balance, and childcare support. It's much easier to have children and raise children and be in a place where you have family, right? And so it's nice to have that support from family. It's nice to be around family where you can be involved. I'm sure during training, or like many people, we miss a lot of family opportunities. So really to think about where does your family fit into this, your own family, and then your family that's a sort of a larger perspective of the people who are extended family in your life. Location is important to consider. So you might want to think about the climate. For some people, that's super important. They want to be in a warm place, or they like 4 seasons, or they don't care. Schools, really important again to think about if you're raising children, what age are they? What is the school system like? What's your partner's job? Obviously, this is a conversation you have to get together, and it's a decision whether it's your spouse, whether it's a living spouse, whether it's your significant, whatever kind of partner you have. Are they able to work remotely? What's the job market for them like, where you want to go, or if you're going to stay in the same area? And what's the community? What's the culture? Might want to think about sort of what's the politics. Do you want to be in a blue state, a red state? We'll leave that and not say more about that, but you get where I'm coming from. Cost of living is super important. Housing costs are vital. I have a friend who works at Stanford, and you can't work at Stanford without getting a loan through Stanford to buy a house because it's so, so expensive. What are the taxes like? Property taxes, cost of living taxes, and again, what are the schools like? Are the schools all exorbitantly expensive? Are they good, public schools? What are the opportunities for schooling? And then proximity to a major airport hub might sound like, well, who cares about that really? But it's 2 things, or it's a few things really, but stronger job market. So when you're in a more of a remote place, the job market is, there are less opportunities, although you could say that the market's stronger in the sense that maybe there are less people going to those places, but also convenience for travel. If you want to go visit your family, you want people to come visit you, if you're not in a place where there's easy access, that could be a deterrent. On the other side, other hand, it might not be a deterrent because you might want to be in a more remote place that might not be vital to you. So these are really important self-reflection things to really focus on and really drill down, be honest with yourself. Let's now look at the professional aspects of self-reflection. So the very first question always comes up, right? Private practice versus academic. So many things to consider, but if you're going into private practice, you want to think about the type of practice. Is it going to be partially academic? Is it going to be a big group like pediatrics with an X? What size practice is it? Do you want to work with 2 colleagues or do you want to have 15 colleagues? What's the structure? Is it, 48 weeks of service a year? Is it covering multiple hospitals? And are there any teaching opportunities? Are there any learners who come through, medical students, residents, fellows, anybody who's there's opportunities to teach? Then in academics, you really want to think about what's your research. If you have very specific research that you want to conduct, you want to make sure that you're considering how can you continue your career with this sort of vein. Thinking about what mentors there are in academic institutions. You want to go to a place where you'll have good mentors and good mentoring to keep you on the track that you've already started. And then teaching opportunities. Are there any leadership opportunities in teaching, in education, or just leadership opportunities in general? Regardless, you want to think about the acuity unit level. So do you want to be in a level 4? Do you want a combination of level 3, 4? Do you not want a delivery service? So what's the model that you want? Do you want to be in a very large practice? Do you want to cover just one hospital versus multiple hospitals? So there are many institutions where we cover a children's hospital that's freestanding, and then we also cover a delivery service. And then what's the opportunity for decision-making and collaboration? And this applies in some ways more to private practice than academic, not because there's not opportunities for decision-making and collaboration, but if you become part of the practice and you're a partner, you might have more decision-making than if you're functioning in an academic institution. Potential for growth, again, leadership opportunities. Is there room to become a partner in private practice? What does that look like? Does it take 20 years? Does it take 5 years? What are the opportunities? Obviously, compensation is important, and so is the bonus structure. And I think this is something that often takes people off by surprise and can be challenging a little bit because the salaries are quite different from what you're accustomed to. And then the bonuses, and we'll talk more about negotiating. And then what schedule? How much service do you want to do? It's going to be more if you're in private practice, but what is the amount of service? What's the call schedule like? Is it from home? Is it in the hospital? What's the protected time, which is vital if you're going to stay in academics and you want to do research? And then are you going to be responsible for working in the high-risk follow-up clinic? Some people really enjoy clinic, and then there are others like me who don't. So it's really important again to reflect on know yourself and know what you like. So let's talk a little bit about there's this paper out there. It's a little bit old. It's from 2012, but it's certainly worth looking at. So there's a number of resources that we're going to list, and we're not going to go through them, but really just take the opportunity once this is posted to just go back to these resources and use them as you find helpful. And so I think now we'll dive into the timeline. Now, remember, this is not as fixed in stone, and it's not, oh my gosh, I didn't start my CV and it's June 1st, but it's really the things to consider and a rough timeline to work from. Start networking early. Talk with leadership, talk with PDs, talk with faculty, talk about everybody you know, because there's lots of ways to find connections. In early June or even before, you should be thinking about your CV and your cover letter. We're going to get into the details of preparing those and also start identifying jobs of interest. Keep looking. Don't stop, but keep looking till you receive an offer because you never know what might come up. And I think it's a good practice to always look. So even if you're now a second-year resident and you're still thinking about what you're going to be doing, start looking at the jobs because it's good to know what the market looks like. So around July, start sending emails to potential jobs. And start to consider that you're going to be asked to prepare a job talk. Now, it might be different if it's an academic or private practice. We'll talk more about preparing the job talk. And vital is do practice interviews. I just find it hard when I interview people and they really haven't practiced and you ask them a question and they look at you and say, that's a great question. I hadn't thought of that. You don't want that to happen. So really, really practice the interview with your spouse, with your PD, with your peers, whoever you can. Once you've sent follow-up or sent emails for potential jobs, sometimes it takes a long time to get something back and sometimes it doesn't. But it's also everybody else in your area and various areas are competing to find jobs. So wait a few weeks and then send a follow-up email. Interviews will start rolling in and it's variable on the timing. So you might start interviews in August and you might still be interviewing in April. So it really depends on the jobs you're looking for, the timeline, the location. You never know. I had a colleague leave in mid-February, and so we were strapped and we needed people. So you just never know how sort of things turn out. Send follow-up emails after the interview. Now, it's some people say, oh, it's not really important, and it's not going to be a make or break, but it just speaks to professionalism. You just want to thank people for their time. And even if you don't think you're interested in it, do it in the job. Do it because A, it shows professionalism. B, you might actually decide on the job later. And C, it's a very small world and we all know each other. So we want to make sure that you're professional and you're appropriate. So do send that thank you follow-up email. And once offer letters start rolling in, you're going to start getting a little bit nervous because now what do I do? And we'll talk more about that, but also send follow-up emails, questions that you might want to ask, really getting sort of into some of the nitty-gritty that you might need to ask. And then contracts should start flying in. Now, again, it might be March. You might have a contract by May, and maybe it'll be a little later, and maybe it'll be a little earlier. It's not set in stone. And then remember, licensing and credentialing is going to start right after you've signed that contract. This is also going to be an example of your professionalism, and it's going to behoove you to get it done as quickly as possible so that you're ready to be up and running to start your job. Okay, so let's go on.
Sorry. All right. So how to get started. So we're going to talk a little bit. And I think, part of what Dr. Robin's saying about sort of thinking about what you're looking for in a job is also thinking about what your strengths are. That may play into what you're also looking for in a job because things that you may be looking for are things that, some divisions may desire over others. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So the first thing that I think comes to everyone's mind is, of course, their CV. So this is really the opportunity for you to show. It's the first impression that many of these division directors and practice directors are going to get of you, and so it needs to be well done. But it's your first, sort of opportunity to show what you have accomplished and the fact that you're qualified for the position. And so it really is a good way to show what you've done during fellowship and even before that. You want to highlight any leadership or administrative skills as much as you can. And I think the biggest piece of advice is don't wait until June when you're going to want to be sending this out. We, really advise our fellows to start as early as possible, even at the beginning of fellowship. And this is true when you go on, if you're on, academic faculty somewhere, your CV is something you want to start early and just have a running living document that you can continuously update. That makes your life much easier. So if you're a first year fellow listening to this, start your CV now, start formatting it now, and then it will make your life so much easier when you start the job search because you can just update it and fix it up. So think about who your audience is. Like I said, this is really one of the first impressions you're going to have on a division director, interviewers. This will go out to, before you go for an interview, entire divisions, people outside the division interviewing you. So you want it to, really have good content and substance. It also will be used for credentialing, and then your future colleagues are going to see it. So you want it to look as good as possible. So the nuts and bolts are the, kind of the things that you would assume, but you would be surprised. I've been on several hiring committees lately, and you would be surprised by some of the things we get. And, it's usually not a make or break having an error on your CV or a poorly formatted CV, but it definitely doesn't give a good first impression if it doesn't look good. So try to make it a minimum of 11-point font. I know that sounds silly, but if the font is really small and you can't read it, that's just frustrating for people. Standard margins, use a simple font, nothing fancy. It really needs to have perfect spelling and grammar. I cannot reiterate this enough. And, we all write things and then later on see a typo, even though you've looked at it 20 times. So have other people look at this. And you probably know within your group or your mentors, like who's the detail person who's gonna, edit the grammar and the spelling. Give it to them and have them look at it. Because you really, again, like little misspellings and grammatical errors can really kind of put a bad taste in the mouth of the interviewers or the hiring committee. So it needs to be perfect. Other simple things you can do to kind of enhance readability, make as many succinct bullet points as you can. Don't put like long paragraphs on it if you can avoid it. Spacing and bolding to kind of highlight points if you want. Make sure the formatting is consistent throughout. I think that's another thing that can really drive readers crazy is if your formatting is all over the place. Don't try to be too verbose. This is not the time to sort of, again, like paragraphs and descriptions of what you're doing. Try to make it like very easy and quick to read. Don't repeat things. Don't make it redundant, and number your pages. So kind of just to get a little bit further into the nuts and bolts, I think one of the best things that you can do when you're kind of starting off and trying to structure your CV is ask, maybe some of the senior fellows who have just gone through the job search, if they're comfortable sharing their CV for you to look at the format, or some of your mentors or your program director, if they have CVs that they could share to let you see the format. But sort of the standard things that are in an academic CV, which is what you're mostly going to be putting together for the job search, are of course your name and credentials, simple contact information. People used to put like their home address and personal information on there. I would advise you, and our School of Medicine advises you against doing that now, but at a minimum, your email address and your a phone number contact for you. And then, of course, followed by all the sort of education, training, certifications, licensure after that. And then usually honors and awards go next, along with your professional memberships. And then, teaching experience, QI activities, research, and scholarly activities as well. So these are all things that you likely have at least something in there. And the reason I say, to maybe get one of the senior fellows or to give you a template or what they have used is because I found when I was first putting my CV together, there were a lot of things that I had done that just didn't even think to put on there or forgot about. And so one of the things that helped me, and I've seen help many fellows in just remembering activities to put on there and get ideas for things to put on there, are by seeing other CVs and seeing what people have included in theirs. Again, a couple of the basics. So use reverse chronological order, be consistent with the date format. I can't tell you how many CVs I've looked at that have like 3 different formats for dates where they put month and year, just year. I mean, I've done this on my own CV and had to correct it. It just happens sometimes, but just try to pay attention to these details. For your citations, be consistent with the style, make sure they're all uniform. Um, do not falsify or exaggerate anything. Again, this is a document that will eventually be used for credentialing. And so worst case scenario is something is inaccurate, even if it's an honest mistake on your CV, but that can become really problematic when you're going through credentialing and hiring. So please make sure that there's no mistakes on there as far as that goes. Don't highlight shortcomings. So if you do get some sort of boilerplate CVs or example of CVs from other people, a lot of times they'll have these subheadings. And if you don't have anything to put in one of the subheadings, just delete it. Don't write none under it. Because again, it just draws attention to the reader, awards none or grants none, just delete that section. And once if you go into an academic position and are on faculty somewhere, usually there are rules about what to keep and what to not keep in your CV, but for these purposes, don't highlight shortcomings by putting none under a category. Just don't include it. Avoid redundancy. Again, it can get really kind of not exciting to read a CV that's listed the same accomplishment under 3 separate headings. And so try to put it under the most appropriate heading and leave it at that for, to keep it as brief as you can. And then again, keep a living document. So if you want to do it on a Google Doc or something else that you can routinely update, I think that's a good idea. I personally, and I know this workflow has worked for several people, I have a note on my phone where every time I think of something I want to add to my CV, I put it on there. And then I keep that and I have like a regular, time where I update my CV every month or every other month, just to keep it going. And that keeps you from forgetting things. So just a couple of other tips. You can include, and this is kind of a stylistic thing, some institutions like this, some don't. But for the purposes of, applying for jobs, you can include sort of a statement of your academic goals or interests. That's really not required. That's something you could sort of draft and then have your division director or program director look at and see, and get some feedback on it. Again, ask faculty, and I would ask multiple faculty members to look at your CV for accuracy, impact, and comprehensive content. I would say many faculty members, unless they're very new, have served on some sort of hiring committee, and so they have good advice. They've seen a lot of CVs. Your program director and division director have certainly seen a lot of CVs. So having them review it is really, really helpful. And again, proofread it and be honest, because it really does need to be accurate and look really nice for hiring committees. So those are sort of the basics of the CV. So moving on to the cover letter, I think this is always a difficult thing to know what to do. And I know I struggled with my cover letters when I applied for positions, and I know that fellows do as well. And so when you're initially contacting a program, you really should include your CV in a cover letter. So whether that's you're applying for a job through an open position that's been posted somewhere, or if you're cold emailing a division director, you want to include this cover letter and the CV. Cover letter's not super long, but it's usually 3 to 4 paragraphs. Try to keep it to 1 page if you can. And I think one of the tricky things about a cover letter is you don't want to use the same cover letter for every job you're applying to. You really do want to individualize it to the position and the institution you're applying to, which is painful and it is extra work. We've all been there, but it's worth the extra effort. So I think the first step is do your research. So find out as much as you can about the institution, the department, the division as you can. If you have an inside, sort of route to get knowledge, if one of your mentors trained there, one of your mentors used to be there, if you know someone at that institution, it does not hurt to reach out to them and try to understand a little bit more about what they're looking for before you write that cover letter and reach out. So use your connections, use the fellows you know there, network. This is where networking comes in to play for sure, to let really what to write in that cover letter that's going to speak to that hiring committee at that institution. So sort of the breakdown of what should be in your cover letter. So the first paragraph, you want to open strong. So this is really going to tell them, who are you as a candidate? What is your connection, if any, to the program, the town, the city? Any connection you can make to that individual place or institution is going to be helpful. And what are you looking for? So, that can be something as simple as I am looking for a, research track position, physician scientist position, or, something along those lines. Then the second paragraph should encompass sort of a brief, amount of information about your exceptional training. So what are you bringing? What have you gotten during fellowship? This is your time to sort of brag about what you've accomplished during and what you've been exposed to during your fellowship. And then the third paragraph is where you really kind of pull it all together. Why are you interested in this program? And this is where you really need to kind of individualize this for each position and you're applying to. So what are you going to bring and what activities do you hope to be involved with to that institution? And this is why, having some way to get, sort of a having read at least about the division in the program, if not reached out to connections or, networked with people in that division is really helpful, because you don't want to write, well, I'm going to bring a, neuro NICU, I'm going to start a neuro NICU program or something, something along those lines when they've already had one for many years. So things like that you want to avoid if you can, or are interested in X area of research, but that's something that they have, no one doing. And so this is where kind of doing your homework beforehand can really help you. Other things to put in that third paragraph are your academic and clinical interests, which kind of goes with the first bullet point there. What are your professional goals? And it is okay to say that you're interested because of geography, just like Beverly just, said. It is important to consider all these other connections, like your family lives in the area, all of these things. Don't make that the main point, though, of this third paragraph. It is okay to mention that, but don't make it seem like you only want to, are interested in the position because of the geography. And then lastly, summarize it. You can put references in there, although often there's a separate section, or they can request those later, and convey your enthusiasm. So just some basic do's and don'ts for your cover letter. So You need to sound enthusiastic. Watch your tone, though. Don't be too over the top. Stay authentic. You need to kind of show that you understand what the division's looking for and needs. And again, this can be really tricky, but use your resources, which we'll talk about in a few slides. Keep it short and be succinct. Try to keep it to a page, and absolutely get feedback on it. Have your division director, your program director, other faculty read it beforehand. Don't try to be funny. This is not the time to, make a joke. Don't send a genetic cover letter. Again, you've got to individualize it to the institution, and don't copy and paste the wrong institution into the cover letter. I've also seen that when reading CVs on our search committees. And don't go over the top with flattery. It's okay to be complimentary and enthusiastic about the division, but there's kind of a line there where you can go, too far, I think, with that. So, kind of thinking a little bit more about using your connections to start your search. So, I remember as a fellow thinking about this and thinking, I mean, I don't know anybody. I'm a fellow who's in training. Like, who do I know? But really, you have more connections than you think. You need to use your resources wisely. And, we talk about this with our fellows every year, but I still think, we probably don't. They probably underutilize us as faculty as far as our connections go to other institutions. So, um, this is part of this is going to conferences at PAS. I would highly recommend going to PAS in your second year if you can. And if there's an institution you really, really want to apply to, you could reach out to them and see if they're going to be there and have a meeting. That's how I got my job here. I met with the division director at PAS my second year. Go to posters for people at that institution. Introduce yourself. I know this is hard. I'm an introvert myself, so this has always been very hard for me. But you need to do this. It's really important. So, and don't stop networking until you signed a contract, to be honest with you. But also talk to as many people as you can. Most people in most institutions, your mentors, your program director, your division head, they know people at many other institutions and are willing to reach out on your behalf. And so sometimes, saying, hey, Dr. Burns said, I'm going to apply to Hopkins, I know you did your fellowship there. Can you help me kind of understand what if they're looking for somebody, what are they looking for? Those kind of connections are really important. Another good source for our fellows has been we have a lot of traveling nurse practitioners, and so they have lots of connections and have seen other institutions. So if nothing else, besides just networking, they can kind of tell you a little bit about the institutions as well. So this is really important and very helpful as you start your search. So initiating contact with programs, I think this is, unless you have been out in the world outside of medicine and had, quote unquote, a real job before, this is completely different from anything you've done before, right? Involving the match. So I think, what we sort of counsel our fellows to do is really start with a list of programs you may be interested in. So, based on geography, all those things that Beverly talked about, start with a list that's kind of more excessive than you probably need, and then you can trim it down from there. Think about all of these things that we talked about self-reflection wise, and what you may want to look for in a program. And then, you can look for open positions, and Beverly's going to talk about some resources for looking for posted positions. But a lot of times these positions are either not posted or they're, posted later than when you're looking. And so much of the time it is involving cold emailing a section head, division director, practice director. And so sending a short email, attaching your CV and cover letter is how you would usually initiate contact with a program. Ask people to advocate for you. So again, this goes back to using your network, your mentors within your current institution or your residency institution, even to help advocate for you and get that CV some attention with the division director. Send reminders. Again, I think our fellows are always really disheartened every year when they cold email a bunch of division directors and get no responses. That is normal. You think about these, practice heads and division directors and people, they get hundreds of emails a day. They, may not be caught up with email. They may lose your email. They may not know yet if they're going to have a position. And so all of these reasons, that is very normal to hear nothing back after your initial email. So don't get discouraged and make sure you send, follow-up emails and reminders. We'll talk about that a little bit on the next slides. And then keep notes because the programs will start to run together as you're going through them and interviewing. Some of our fellows have made spreadsheets and things like that, but whatever works for you is good. So like I said, networking is really important, especially at in-person meetings. Ask your faculty at your program to help introduce you to people. That can make it a little bit easier. And then, talking with people at your poster, you can also make connections that way. Asking your mentors or faculty to introduce you to people they know in the field, either over email or at, meetings and conferences and things like that. I think part of what is a little bit uncomfortable about this process for some people is you really do have to self-promote, and that's part of the CV and cover letter, but you're really selling yourself to these divisions. And so you need to kind of tell them how great you are, which you all are. And so you really self-promote. And again, don't get discouraged if you don't hear anything back. That is incredibly common. And so generally, I think a good rule of thumb is to follow up every couple of weeks. And probably if you don't get a response by the third time, then maybe let it go. But, um, make sure you follow up. And if you get a reply that there's not a current job opening, ask them if they'll keep your CV on file to keep in mind if there does, happen to be an opportunity that comes up later. Different institutions have different sort of budget cycles, and it may just be that the dates are not aligning with when you've sent your information. So just moving into the interview, you kind of saw the statistics at the beginning of the talk about virtual versus in-person interviews. I think a lot of places do kind of their initial screening first interviews virtually. I think that's pretty common. I think first, just a little note of advice, and this is me being a program director, but know how your fellowship handles time off for interviews. So some programs have policies. We have a policy here for how many days that, we'll give fellows off to travel to go to interviews. But just kind of know if there's a policy or what the kind of guidelines around that are for your individual program. Most jobs, almost all of them, should be sending you an agenda before your interview with a list of people who are going to be talking to you. You really, really need to research those people as much as you can and know your audience. This again will help you avoid saying things that are, awkward, or assuming you're going to bring something that they already have, or things like that. And also make a list of questions for each person. So, you're going to have a different set of questions for the medical director than you are for maybe the program director or the division chief or a potential research mentor. And so really it does take some homework on the front end to be able to do this. Like Beverly said, practice interviewing. I know it's really awkward with people but you've got to practice interviewing. Our fellows actually have a running list of questions they have been asked in interviews on a Google Doc. And so that gives us like a really nice little repository of practice questions and just to think through before you go on interviews. So I would encourage you to keep something like that and think of answers beforehand. Ask a lot of questions. It shows interest. Keep marketing yourself. It's going to be a really long day. These faculty interview days are very long. And take notes, because again, it'll all end. In the end, a lot of the details will blur. And then your second interview, if you get a second interview, this means the program is really serious about you. A lot of times these actually are in person. And so if they're going to spend the money to fly you or, pay for you to come somewhere, they're serious about you as a candidate. This is really an opportunity to understand the job better and find out details. So what can they do for you? What can you offer them? What do they want you to accomplish? Oftentimes before the second interview, I know we do this at our institution, we actually ask the candidate who they want to talk to. And so if you're on a research track or you have a specific job track, look through the faculty and see, who either is recently hired, a junior faculty who has a similar, sort of track, who would be potential research mentors. This is a time if you're going, trying to kind of do the K route or the research track route, you really need to be interviewing potential research mentors to see if there are people there who can mentor you. And then you may be asked to give a job talk. And that's I'll go over that in the next slide during that second interview. So the job talk, and this is again something that has always caused a lot of anxiety. I remember for myself when I was interviewing, but as well as our fellows. And a job talk is really often during the second interview. It's anywhere between, 30 minutes to an hour of really you kind of getting to present yourself to a larger audience. So usually this is the entire division. It may be, expanded beyond that if there's specific research you're doing that's not within neonatology. And these talks should really have three main components. Who are you? What is your story? And what have you accomplished during fellowship? And what is your vision? And what will you add to their division? you got to practice this, practice it in front of your division or a small group if you can, so that they can help, kind of coach you. Again, just like the CV, this cannot have any errors or typos. So you got to have somebody else look at this. It's not going to be the make or break, but it doesn't bode well if you have a bunch of typos or even a few typos in your slides. And then know your audience. So again, like, you don't need to explain what neonatal pathology is to a group of neonatologists, but that's true for any talk, but especially for the job talk, know your audience and know who you're talking to. Okay.
All right, so you've gone through all that, and now your offer letters start coming in. What's an offer letter? Generally, is going to tell you what the job expects from you and what the job will give you. Now, sometimes you'll get an offer on the phone and they'll tell you that a letter is coming. And sometimes that call on this is, we're going to offer you the job can be a little bit overwhelming. So it's nice to get the letter that outlines what you're going to be doing, what they're going to offer you, whether, from the standpoint of compensation, hours, all those types of things. There's no absolute time in which you need to accept, but in general, about 30 days, about a month. And people range from 2 days to 6 weeks. Remember this, you don't have a job yet. When you get that offer letter, it's just a letter that's telling you what they want and what they'll give you. It's not legally binding. And so there can be conversations around it. This is just the first approach that they're going to do to tell you. Okay, next slide, please. So this is what can be very challenging is if you get multiple opportunities, which that's really lucky. If you do, that's fabulous. But this can be the hardest part of the job. Some places will hire early, in general private practices, and some are going to hire later, generally these large bureaucratic academic centers. But again, you never know what's going to happen. As I said, one of my colleagues left our academic institution in February. And so there we were scrambling because most people had already interviewed. So you never know when jobs are going to open up. And sometimes you're waiting for other opportunities that you prefer, but you've got this offer letter. And so now what do you do? Really important to be honest, but don't be blunt. And remember, all of us know each other. The neonatology community is super, super small in terms of program directors, chairs, division heads. It's really a small world. So be honest. Sometimes you might have the luxury of saying, I was hoping to stay in the city I'm in because my significant other's job is so and so, but I'm very interested in your opportunity and I should know in the next few days or whatever it is. They should understand, they don't always, the dynamic that you're looking in multiple places and also that this is new for you. Once you get the offer, the clock has started because they don't want to say, well, sure, take your time. We give you the next 4 months to decide. And this is a time also to really look in your heart of hearts and really reflect, like, is this really what I want? I don't want to pass up this opportunity waiting for something else that I think might be better. And remember, there are no perfect jobs. I always think about, again, this job that you get is your first job. Not saying don't take a good job, but it doesn't have to be your job for life. So think about, will this meet your needs? Will this provide you the professional and the personal experience and accomplishments that you want for the next 5 years? And if it ends up being 10 or 15, fabulous. Okay, so now you've got this offer and you want to start negotiating because you're interested in accepting this offer. And I think this is a very hard thing for people to do because you've never had to do this before. I really find that it's more difficult for women than for men in general. But this is a time to practice doing this. So the things that you can negotiate for are money. So salary, much less so in an academic institution than in a private practice. So salary is certainly negotiable. CME funds, which again also is not going to be very negotiable in an academic institution, but in private practice, quite negotiable. Relocation costs, which are not uncommon in both private and academic, where you're moving from New York to California with your whole family, they very often will pay for the relocation or give you a stipend. And sometimes it doesn't cover all of it. And sometimes it covers only, you only need it for a portion and you've got the rest of the money that you can use for something else. Certainly for research, you want to make sure that you understand, is there going to be some startup funds? So if you're wanting to go for a K ward or a T award or whatever it is you're looking for, you're going to need to have some money to get started in your research. So how can they help you? What is the opportunities for that? And then classes or training. So sometimes people are doing a master's degree, or they want to do a master's degree, or they want to do a POCUS workshop, or whatever it is. And most of those things within reason, they'll be happy to negotiate because it's going to be something that you're bringing to them. Um, Time you sometimes can negotiate. This is challenging too, and it's not an easy thing to negotiate. But there are times, especially if you're thinking about your research, and maybe you can negotiate that the first 2 years you'll do X clinical time, and then once you've got some research under your belt, maybe it'll be less, and maybe it's contingent on grants or more institutional funding or something like that. Seek advice from the people you know. Again, ask people, ask mentors, ask program directors, your division director, ask all the people you know and ask other fellows, well, what did they do? How did they do this? But please, please be realistic. I've seen trainees be offered an enormous amount of money for private practice jobs, and then they go in and they start negotiating for more. You don't want to be unrealistic. And so, especially with things like money, if you're negotiating for money, if you ask for another 50 or $60,000, that's ridiculous. If you ask for 10 or 15 or 20, that might be reasonable. And realize if you ask for 20, perhaps you'll get 10. So don't be unreasonable, but also I think it's very easy to feel like, wow, I don't really have any negotiating power. I'm just a fellow. I've just finished. What do I bring? But try change that mindset because you've had that mindset through all the training. Now that really is something you have that they want to buy. They really are interested in you if they're interviewing you. So you do bring something that's meaningful to them. Remember, there should be a phone call, not an email. So you don't send an email back saying, can I have more money or more time or whatever it is, and practice this conversation. It's a very hard conversation to do when you're not accustomed to it. Make sure that you practice so that you're prepared, and think about too what their response might be, because you might get response that you might need to say back, I need a few days to think about this. Don't get thrown off and make any promises or respond in a way that you might not want to just because you're thrown off. So contracts, we're not going to go into much detail about this, but in general, the recommendation is to have a lawyer review your contract. It's very different if you're looking at academic versus private, because in academic, there really isn't a lot they're going to change. And, there's not a lot that's really going to be negotiable. Private contracts, private jobs, much more so. And again, think about what you can negotiate and how the lawyer can help you. Non-compete clauses become really important. They are often existing in academic institutions, but even more so in private practices. So that is something that's very important to talk about if you are concerned that you might leave after a few years, and can you remain in the same area. And so, it's hard to know whether this is, I think for most people, it really makes sense to have a lawyer. Some people say, well, my aunt is an immigration lawyer. She'll look over it for me. But really get an employment attorney to look at this. And there are people who focus specifically on these types of contracts. There's a lot of resources out there for looking for jobs. So TCAN has a career development and leadership. Neonatology Solutions has a lot of different jobs on there. They're not always up to date, but there are a lot of job resources on there that you can sort of find institutions, even if they're not current jobs, and maybe reach out. And then there are other resources like Neonatology on the web, which I looked at last night and really isn't up to date, but it does have some resources there too. New England Journal has a career center that you can sign up and you can put in sort of job descriptions or keywords, and they'll send you updates. And then if you're looking at pediatrics, they certainly have their job site that you could look at, and there's some resources on there as well. Other resources, the AAMC puts out a faculty salary report. It comes out, I think, every year. It's not easy to get. You have to be a member, but you can get a faculty person or your PD to get a hold of that, because that's always hard to really know. Like, what is the salary? What should I be asking for? They offered me X. Is that reasonable? This paper came out in 2019. Also looks at some factors around salary. It's not, as recent, but still. And then there's another one here, factors influencing compensation of early career neonatologists. So look at some of these resources. You could reach out to people, but certainly do your homework. More characteristics of early career neonatologists. And remember, pay it back to your co-fellows. Once you have a job, share information with junior fellows, meet with them and share your experience, and advocate for them when they are applying for jobs, because you've hopefully had people do the same thing for you. And like Jen said, a nice list of questions or various things, or maybe something you were asked that was completely unexpected, really to help your co-fellows. So we have about 8 minutes. There is a QR code at the end for you to evaluate the session, but we'll see what questions you have. Please, this is informal, feel free, and there's no questions that are, not, they're all meaningful questions, whatever it is.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for this great overview. We do have some questions already that were asked in the Q&A, so I'll start with those. But again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. We'd be happy to take those live. I'm going to start with a question that is similar to what you had just kind of ended with, Dr. Robin, about negotiating and how, as a fellow, you really don't seem to have a lot of leverage. But you kind of talked about that you have leverage because they want somebody in the job. They want you there potentially. Can you advocate for many things, or should you really be focused on one thing when you're looking at your contract?
Well, I think it depends. If you're going to ask for six different things, it's not going to make sense, right? But think to yourself, like, what is most important? When I think about my first job, it was an academic job, but there was a small component of covering a community NICU, and I really wasn't so keen on that. So I negotiated that, and I negotiated salary. The salary they didn't budge on. The other part of it they budged on. So think about what is most important, make your list of priorities, and then pick one or two things, but don't make a whole long list, because they will not be happy with you.
I think part of it, just to add, is, what are they asking you to do, right? Are there other roles or programs or things, you feel like you have nothing to add when you come out of fellowship, or, I'm just starting off. What do I have to add? But if there are things they're asking you to do, roles to take on, things like that, it is worth asking if you can have additional pay or time dedicated, FTE, a small amount of FTE to dedicate to those roles, because your biggest bargaining chip for those is when you start, not like a year later when you realize how much work it is and you've been doing the role with, for free essentially. So it's worth trying, but I agree. Try to prioritize it to one or two things that you're asking for.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question kind of goes along with that, but how do you know how much money is too much money? Is there a way to look at salaries besides the AAMC? Are people being more conscious of, or maybe more vocal about it? I feel like in my evaluation so far of things since I've graduated, people are more forthcoming of their salaries, but I don't know if that is something that you have noticed, or another thing that people can look for.
I do find people talk about salary. I know when any of my fellows get a job, I always know what they're going to make. They're
Yeah.
pretty open about it. And I think part of it is because it's so exciting to get so much more money than you're accustomed to. The double AMC, I think, is the best place to look, but certainly you can get a sense within an area, talk with people, get a sense of what other fellows are being offered. Um, and it's hard to say what's too much money, but again, if you ask for 15 or $20,000 extra, or you ask for money to, I'll give you an example. I was finishing a master's degree, and so when I actually came to Rush, I asked them to finish off paying for my master's degree, and so it was probably like $10,000. But if you ask them to put you through a program that's a degree program you want to take that's $75,000, they're going to be less likely to do that, right? So be realistic. And I can't give you an exact number, but I always think if you're negotiating for salary, 10, 15, $20,000 makes sense additional. Once you're looking at 30, 40, 50, you're pushing it. And they might, if you're looking at an area that's really, I had a fellow actually do this. He was going to an area that was very underserved. And the salary that he got offered was very generous. And I was very surprised because he negotiated more money and he got it. But I was a little thrown off because it just felt nervy to ask for that much. So I really think 20 should be a cutoff, and that's just my opinion. I think it's really important to practice these conversations, even if nothing comes of it and they say they can't do it, nothing is lost. And if they say, look, I can't do 20, but I'll give you five, great. And if you have enough the wherewithal, you could maybe say, well, how about seven? But you don't want to be pushing it too far.
I think another important question, somewhere in that negotiation offer letter process is to ask them what benchmark they're using for their salaries. So there is AAMC, but for instance, our institution uses triple AP, which is the Academic Association for Pediatrics. So I think asking them the benchmarks and like where does it fall in the benchmark? I think that's a reasonable question
Yeah,
to ask, like once you have the offer letter and you're kind of discussing about salary.
excellent. Thank you so much. The next question is, how with this, a little clarification about the process of actually reaching out. Because I think there's a difference between reaching out to specific, either the medical director or the division director versus applying through like a job that you see. And this person was worried about kind of the timing that happens if you're reaching out to someone before actually applying. How can that lengthen the time?
Yeah, I think if there is an open position, I think you should go through the application. If there's a link to an application, I think that's the right way to go about it. I mean, we've certainly had, for instance, in our division, people cold email our division director to ask with their CV and cover letter, and he often just refers them to the open application, right? So I don't think you can go wrong necessarily with that. I would double check though, because that there's not an application open that you can just go right to, because otherwise you risk it just getting stuck in someone's email inbox, for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have one more question that we'll hopefully answer real quick. But this person asked about, how to schedule the interviews, because if you only have about a month, which really I feel like sometimes you have a week and sometimes you can ask for a little bit longer between your interviews and potential acceptances that you have. Should you try to really focus having all of your interviews at one time, or is it okay to kind of spread that out so that way you're not also exhausted?
I think that's hard because I think
Yeah.
this is one of the hardest parts of the process that I have observed in fellows is like the varying timelines. And I think it's even if you try to make your interviews all around the same time, that doesn't mean that they're going to get back to you with an offer. Like I have seen anywhere from like 24 hours to a month plus that offer comes out of an interview. So I don't know, Beverly, if you have something to add to that, but it is challenging. I don't
Yeah, no,
agree.
I agree. I don't think there's an easy way of doing it. But also be realistic in how many places you're looking at, right? You're not going to go on 20 interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being honest is probably the best thing to say. And they know if you're interviewing with them, you're likely probably looking at other places. So I think
Mhm.
it's okay to say, I'm waiting to hear back from this place. Can I have, another week or so? I don't think that's unreasonable to ask. If they are interested in you, I think they will definitely help work with you. Maybe if they're not going to be willing to help you, that might also be another sign.
I agree about that. I actually had somebody that I was mentoring who's a fellow, not in this institution, a different institution, and they were really pressuring her. She asked for a little bit more time, and they told her that if she couldn't respond by Wednesday or whatever it was only a few days, then they were going to withdraw the offer. And so to me, that was just a huge red flag. They just wanted her to sign, and it wasn't. It was a good miss. She didn't go there, and it worked out well.
That's great. Um, I don't have any other questions today, and I think we're just about at time. So I want to thank both of you ladies for presenting today and working with us and answering all these questions. I am very, very thankful that you guys took the time to start off this series this year. I think this was a resounding success, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just for the people listening, we will be recording this and putting it on YouTube. We do have many future sessions coming for the job search series, so keep an eye out for registration for those. And again, if you are able, please give us some feedback so that way we can improve this series every year. Thanks again, everybody.
Great. Thanks so
Thanks.
much. If anyone
Bye.
has questions, feel free to reach out.